A couple of things for an optimal experience tonight. We recommend that you keep Zoom on speaker view, and please note that this town hall is being recorded. We'd like to thank you for joining the Green Party of Ontario's third platform town hall. This time it's in the community spotlight on Parry Sound Muskoka. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. As we open this space and our time together tonight, I'd like to invite you to join me in acknowledging that we meet on the traditional territories and unceded Indigenous lands here and across Ontario. Land acknowledgements are a practice that I've been able to participate in for many years. And part of that for me is walking the path of reconciliation. And that means two things. That means that it's a journey that's still in progress and that we're not standing still. This means how we acknowledge the land cannot stand still either. Land acknowledgements for me are not a box to be checked, a to-do to be crossed off, or a video to be played at the beginning of a meeting. They need to be personal, authentic, real, and living. So tonight I join you from land, which was part of the Between the Lakes Purchase Treaty, which is where I spend my time living, working, and playing. I've read this treaty, and I encourage you to find the treaty which was agreed to and has yet to be honored for the places where you live, work, and play. One place to start is the ontario.ca website, and I'll share a link where you can find more about reading up on what the treaty that you live on. And I know that there's a really rich and diverse set of communities, including Indigenous peoples, in the riding. And so from the traditional territories and unceded lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Attawandaron, and the current territory, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, I invite you to reflect on the fact that this is dish with one spoon territory, where we all have an agreement that this land is a shared bowl, and that there's one spoon for all of us, and then we must ensure that the shared bowl is never empty. And as we work towards a better future for all people of Canada, between communities, between provinces, and between nations, we acknowledge the importance of bringing Indigenous teachings, such as the principle of 7 generations, to our leadership and governance. This is the principle that we, as we live our lives and build our community, ensure that we're not only for today. Thanks so much. So with that, we have a few things to go over before we get things rolling with our fantastic panelists. This event is all about understanding your concerns and your ideas for building a healthier, stronger, and greener community that works for everyone, and getting your feedback to help inform the Green Party of Ontario's platform. As you may know, we're coming up on just over a year until the next provincial election, June 2nd, 2022. And this is the part of the work that the Green Party of Ontario is doing to do the research, do the work, to listen, understand, and earn the support of people across Ontario. We have a great panel this evening. There will also be a Q&A session later where we'll take questions from you. So a few rules to go over before we get started. We ask that everyone remain on mute and only unmute when you're speaking or called upon. If you're on the phone, callers can press *6 on their telephone keypad to toggle between mute and unmute. For those who have a video connection with us, please ensure you have your correct name displayed. Also, we'll be using the polling feature to help guide our discussion. When prompted, please complete the poll if you're joining us through the video feature. We'll also be using the raise hand function when Mike asks the audience questions. Callers can raise their hand by pressing *9. During the open audience portion, please type your questions into the chat window and we'll do our best to pick a variety. Those calling into the town hall won't have the chat function, unfortunately, but we'll do our best to include you as time allows. Before we wrap up this opening, please know that today is a safer space for all guests and participants. And today we're joined by our equity officer, Ranju. I want to be very clear that there's zero tolerance for hate, abusive, or discriminatory language or harassment. We ask that everyone participate with respect for one another and in the spirit for community. All right, so let's kick things off with an audience poll. So this poll is asking about Parry Sound Muskoka, but for those who are tuning in today may not live in the riding, please feel free to adapt these answers to what concerns where you live. So for those of you on the video call, you'll see that poll up now. And the question is, when you think about the quality of life in the Parry Sound Muskoka community today, what are the top 3 issues that concern you? And I'm going to answer these for where I live in Wellington Halton Hills. But this is a great chance for us to take a look at how these polls will work. And if it's going to give us the starting point for our discussion. I'm just going to give it another moment. I see a few more votes coming in. This is the first time I've seen the results on this particular view, and I can see them going up and down. It's really quite a bit of fun. Well, Jess, what do you think? Does that look like it's settled down? Well, a couple more late breaking votes. We're gonna have to keep the polls open this time, I think. All right, let's take a look at those responses. Okay, so in part to help our friends on the phone, I'm going to read some of the top answers here. By a long stretch, 74% solutions to address the climate crisis. Also very high access to affordable housing. Sorry, climate crisis was at 74%. 67% access to affordable housing, then inappropriate development, and then a number of other things, internet service, access to primary care, definitely some rural extension issues. I live in Puslinch between Guelph and in Cambridge. I'm well familiar with a lot of these, especially the internet. I'm actually at my mom's tonight, so I can use her fast Rogers cable modem for this event tonight. Okay, well, thank you for participating in the poll. And I'm going to turn the spotlight over now to Mike Schreiner, leader of the Green Party of Ontario, who's going to introduce our guests and discuss our reactions to the first poll. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Sean, thank you so much. And it's fantastic to have everyone join us tonight. It is so important to hear from as many voices as possible as we develop our 2022 platform. And I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight. We have 2 excellent panelists. And I'm looking forward to hearing your views on how we can make our communities in Parry Sound Muskoka in particular a more resilient, sustainable, affordable, caring, and inclusive community. And I think it's important as we think about building out a provincial platform that we also think about how provincial-wide policies impact specific communities and ridings like Parry Sound Muskoka. And we have 2 excellent panelists tonight who know the riding, the communities, and the region well. So I'd first like to introduce Hannah Lynn, who has been the executive director of the YWCA Muskoka since 2014. Hannah has over 30 years experience working in nonprofit organizations, focusing on youth, arts, education, culture, and heritage. In 2014, she was awarded the Jessie Dunn Award for her outstanding contributions and advocacy on behalf of children in Muskoka. I'd also like to introduce Matt Richter, who is the GPO's nominated candidate for Parry Sound Muskoka and has been a friend and a colleague for a number of years now. Most of you know Matt as a teacher, an entrepreneur, and a community builder. And I can tell you, every time I visit Parry Sound Muskoka, I realize the deep roots and special community connections Matt has. And I'll have to say I'm biased, of course, but I think Matt would make a strong, powerful voice for Parry Sound Muskoka at Queen's Park and be able to make a real difference for his community, the region, and the riding. So I was interested in, I'm going to ask for both of you to respond to the poll responses, but my first response was, okay, people in Parry Sound Muskoka understand we're facing a climate crisis. And you can tell that from the poll results. And I'll never forget a few years ago when the last round of flooding hit Muskoka. And Matt, you took me to visit a gentleman who had taken his life savings and built a house and done tons of research and made sure his house was 2 meters above any flood level in recorded history. And for the second time in 5 years, he was sandbagging his house due to the rising waters. And if there was ever sort of a moment that for me highlighted just the personal impacts that climate is having and ultimately will have, I think the concerns around housing affordability, I tell people I've probably knocked on as many or more doors as anybody in Ontario over the last decade. And I would say more than any other issue, whether I'm in a place like my riding here in Guelph, or I'm in Toronto, or I'm in a place like Parry Sound Muskoka, housing affordability comes up over and over again. And so many people are struggling to find an affordable place to call home. And that's something we definitely have to fix. And then finally, concerns around development issues. I would say, and I don't want to be overly partisan here, but the current government and the current premier is probably engaged in one of the most systematic dismantling of environmental protections to facilitate inappropriate development, probably of any premier in Ontario's history. And so I can certainly understand why people are concerned about development in the wrong places, and especially people who have personally experienced flooding, because so much of that inappropriate development is on things like wetlands that protect us from flooding. So Hannah, I'm going to give you a chance. I've talked long enough. I'm going to give you a chance to respond to the poll results and see what your thoughts are.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And thanks for having me tonight. When Matt asked over the weekend, I was intrepid, and then I thought, well, it's a spotlight on a region that I've lived in for 17 years. And the YWCA, my role as executive director, has given me the opportunity to meet lots of people, and really we impact so many different issues across the region and people, right? I mean, people are bringing their needs to the forefront. And I find this interesting because it's no surprise to me that affordable housing is the top concern, and that you also say that you're seeing that across the province, and we're hearing that across the country. The development, I live in Barkway. So for those of you who are in Muskoka, I'm about 14 kilometers east of Gravenhurst. We live on 5 acres, and we're slowly building our house in the bush. We have gardens, we have chickens, we have a couple dogs who may interject, and the internet is unstable. So hopefully it'll be good with us tonight. And I look at this list, and the whole list are definitely issues that are impacting us, and we're seeing it from different people, but they are all intersecting, right? So if you're, in my case, for example, my nurse practitioner, my healthcare provider is 100 kilometers away in Huntsville, right? That means I have to have reliable transportation, and it's personal transportation to my privilege. I work in Bracebridge, which is 30 kilometers away, sometimes because that internet is unstable. And I work with a lot of women who are trying to start small businesses or dealing with the fact that the pandemic really made them shut down, right? We know that women have been disproportionately affected big time by the pandemic. We haven't seen women leave the workforce in these numbers since probably the 40s. So I think it'd be very interesting to see this coming year ahead. I'm glad actually we have the opportunity for a year to really galvanize and consider what are the issues that are most important to Ontarians and particular to Muskokans.
Great, thanks for that, Hannah. And Matt, what are your thoughts?
And thank you, Mike. And and for polls like this, they're so meaningful. I know you said at the beginning that I feel like I do have a good knowledge of our riding, but it's only because of events like this and all the other times that we get to meet. But this is so impactful, and it does confirm what I'm seeing across our riding. And to Hannah's point, and again, thank you, Hannah, for joining us, but our riding is so vast. We are called Parry Sound Muskoka, but that includes an area called Almagwin as well. You know, we extend from Severn Bridge, south of Gravenhurst, right up to basically North Bay, Algonquin Park to Georgian Bay, and all within that encompassing area, we have 6 First Nations, we have 26 municipalities, and all of those areas are impacted by climate change, whether it be flooding in the Bracebridge, Muskoka area and throughout others, but also something that is front and center in the springtime up here is the quality of our roads. And with climate change, we get these frost, thaw, heaving cycles that I know are a major pain in the side of our vehicles up here at those times of years. And then, of course, across our riding, affordable housing. You know, it is shocking, and we're not immune. I know, I realize that it's happening across Ontario, but we hear consistently that people's income is not keeping up to the cost of living. And, you know, our homes, and I can say more in the Huntsville area, you know, just about 5 years ago, the average house price was approximately 300 to 350,000. That's what the real estate boards say. And so between 300, 350, 5 years later to present day, we're now facing 500,000+ for an average home. So clearly this is like, it's an obvious choice to be getting into our top 3. And inappropriate development, we see this in Huntsville, we've seen it down towards Baysville. We see the where they're just decimating our wetlands and forests to build developments that are not hitting affordable housing targets. They're hitting a premium target just for self-interest. And so, not to be negative or cynical with the state of affairs, but this poll clearly shows that we have some work to do. And I'm looking forward to this evening, again, to getting the guidance and the input from all of you to make sure that our platform has a focus that I can take into the election next year that really offers a compelling vision forward that will make our lives more fair, just, and prosperous.
Great, thanks for that, Matt. And before we start taking some questions from the audience and just having some responses to a question I'm going to have to folks, I wanted to ask both of you a couple questions. And the first one is partly inspired by Hannah's opening comments. The COVID pandemic for me has really exposed a lot of the systemic inequities in our society. And women in particular have been hard hit by the she-cession. But I would also say that a lot of women have been on the front lines of the pandemic as well, whether it's personal support workers, nurses, grocery clerks, a lot of professions that are predominantly women professions have been particularly hard hit by the pandemic. And we had a town hall last week on systemic racism, and the panelists really talked about how Black, Indigenous, people of color have been disproportionately impacted by COVID as well. And so as you sort of think about, as you know, Parry Sound Muskoka, I would just ask, what for you are the biggest economic disparities you see in your community? And what are some of the steps and policies we can take to address them? And so, Hannah, do you want to start?
Okay, that's a big question. and I'm looking forward to hearing what other people also, because it is a town hall, right? And I think part of the steps we take are in the listening and doing these kinds of events and coming together and learning and increasing our own individual awareness. What I see when I work with, we have a team of 17, and we are mostly outreach, doing YW as a Y Without Walls across the region. The biggest economic disparity is certainly the housing, based in housing, when the wait lists are doubling every 5 years for housing. And then those people that are waiting for a spot in our region, they're in the campgrounds. They're booking a motel for a week. They are living with other family members. They're couch surfing, right? And so at the same time, they're trying to feed their family. And at this point in time, with services like the Restores, the Sally Ann's, the Value Villages, the place where they would normally shop, also closed. The poverty, I think when we measured it a couple of years ago, it was 13% in our region, and our median employment income was 20% below the rest of the province. I can only imagine that that number is growing and it's getting worse. And Muskoka is a special place. It also experiences a very big and growing income gap. And so I think it's very interesting that you just had a panel about anti-racism, because I think that's a part of the solution, is together as a population, as citizens in this province, we need to move away from the polarization between the seasonal residents and the year-round residents, those who are on low income, those who are cottagers, the perceptions that we have of one another. We don't want those perceptions to hold us back from finding the common solutions for this place where we love to be, right? People come to Muskoka because it's beautiful, and they can live with the bugs, but they want to be out paddling the canoe, right? Or living in the woods, or eating wild ramps right now, right? So I think it's a very precious place. And we need to, I'm not the policy expert, but I look to us increasing OW, increasing ODSP, rent controls, dealing with opening it up to housing. Like, there's a great new movement, and it's not new, of co-housing, tiny housing, changing some of the zoning in our region to not just consider the new builds, right? I think that's a big piece of where we'll go. I like the idea of green retrofits. I also love the idea about green electric cars, but we don't have very many electric car stations to charge in Muskoka. I can think of 3 or 4, right? And the distances are big. So I'd like to see more bike lanes in Muskoka. I really would. That's a big one.
Yeah, I can relate to everything you said, but I thought it was particularly interesting. You know, Muskoka has a special challenge where there's so many cottagers and so many people part of the service industry that makes it a unique region. And I can tell you, I'm debating, my daughter and I, as Matt know, we do a daddy-daughter canoe trip every year, and we're doing it in northern Temagami this year. And I've been debating whether I can do it in my electric car or not. And I've been charting out the various charging options along the way, trying to decide if it's possible or not. So
you have to map your route,
well.
right? I would love to see it, and maybe this is our next question, but I would love to see it where people in Muskoka really use bikes and people-powered transportation and electric cars for transportation, and not just the sport recreation. I'm training for a triathlon, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
To get around, I think that would be game changing for us. And on the, as our question was about economic disparity, I look at, you know, in this past year, since last April, our organization has helped 150 families with emergency financial need. And we know that the food group in Gravenhurst serves 650 meals every Thursday night, right? That number has gone probably from 6-fold in the last little while. So food security, everybody's growing gardens, right? It's a big deal.
Yeah, I was. I'm going to let Matt. Actually, you know, I can keep talking, but Matt, what you take a stab at your perception of the biggest economic disparities in the community.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of it echoes exactly where Hannah was saying. Income does not match the cost of living. And sometimes that income comes in the form of ODSP payments, OW, but it simply does not match it. And, you know, the other day, I just had another person from Parry Sound personally reach out to me with a Facebook message saying, Matt, we're a year off. We are desperate. But then pride comes into it too. Like, that's one of those unwritten issues that rarely comes up, is that there is this aspect of pride, but people have to put everything in place so that they know the loops, the hurdles to get through in navigating that system to make sure that they're getting the income they need. But sometimes people, they don't have the access to navigate the system, to get the updates, to get the different grants that they may deserve. And it just simply is not keeping up. The rate of their income just simply isn't. There's the seasonal and inconsistent work. And then there's the unreasonable demands of people who do have employment. And I see this every day when I'm in the bricks and mortar of schools. But within even our education system, I see our EAs and our custodians having increased work demands, but then less hours. So they're actually getting pay cuts and having to do more work. And they're the ones that keep our schools together. And so I'm seeing these EAs, custodians, and a lot of educational staff taking on second jobs and third jobs, and then sometimes even having to, deviate through different systems so that they can be making some extra money under the table. And like, these are just the harsh realities, and it's unfair. And so all these economic disparities continue, and they haven't been improving. There's the people who have to live in rural areas and don't have transportation. And in fact, Hannah, it was the YWCA event a couple of years ago that really shed the light on many women who live in rural areas, whose spouse or boyfriend have the only vehicle and they're gone, and now they don't have access to get into town. And I remember these really heartfelt stories, and I'm still hearing them today. And so it just shows how much work needs to be done. And the basic solutions that I can think of that come front and center are the discussions around the guaranteed annual income, a fair living wage, and for our youth and young adults, having some sensibility with tuition costs when it comes to college and university, so that they can get a head start instead of being way behind when they're finishing up their post-secondary education.
Yeah, I hear both of you. It's ironic, I'll be debating clause by clause on a bill on Friday in committee, and it's supposedly to reduce red tape, but part of it is actually creating more red tape for people on ODSP and Ontario Works, who already, I think, face so many barriers to accessing support and services. And trust me, I will be putting forward a number of amendments to try to address that. So we'll see if the Conservatives agree to them or not. I want to quickly ask you one more question, and then let's go to the audience. So maybe quick answers on this one. We're facing a public health crisis and an economic crisis that's come out of it. But I think it's important that we don't forget that the climate crisis is bearing down on us as well, and we're running out of time. And both of you have talked about the importance of transportation and housing. And it's interesting because transportation is the largest source of climate pollution in Ontario. And our buildings are the second, along, and then industry and buildings are kind of close second and third. And so I'm just wondering if you have some thoughts about addressing reducing greenhouse gas emissions through transportation and housing in ways that will improve people's day-to-day lives. And so, Matt, maybe I'll start with you this time and then turn it over to Hannah.
Sure. I'll focus on the transportation aspect to this one, and bringing back passenger rail is critical, and connecting our cities in our riding, connecting our larger town centers with other regional transportation ability would be so effective. And it's about making sure the price point is there. That's always been a concern. And of course, the reliability. Nobody's going to take passenger rail or take bus or transit of any kind if it's not reliable service. And that addresses not only the climate, because obviously less fossil fuels being burned going around, even the day will come though as well where it can even be another step forward with electric vehicles for our buses, and depending on what happens with passenger rail. But it also improves the quality of life for many of our residents, our constituents in Parry Sound Muskoka, that simply cannot get to, say, a doctor appointment, or cannot get to a certain event because of where they live. And maybe it's their age or just the circumstance that they find themselves in, that we need this to address climate change, but also to address their quality of life. And it comes down to, again, passenger rail and an interconnected grid between Parry Sound to Huntsville, north up through to South River towards North Bay, and of course down to Gravenhurst and throughout.
Great, thanks for that, Matt. And what are your thoughts, Hannah?
Well, the train thing, interestingly enough, I was thinking about this earlier. The last time I remember when our train was running out of Bracebridge, I was returning a guest speaker who came up from Toronto. She didn't drive, she didn't have a car. She came on the train. And I remember waiting with her at the bus station for the train to go back to Toronto. And there was a gentleman there who was a senior from Gravenhurst. And he told me that he took the train between Gravenhurst and Bracebridge because it was cheaper than taking a cab to his medical appointment, right? And you're talking about 15 minutes if you had your own car to drive. And that stuck with me when I think about trains. And I saw the announcement recently in the newspaper from our MPP Current about how great it was to move the study forward on the transportation and the trains. And his comment was about tourism. And I think to me, it kind of missed the mark. Yes, I know that in Muskoka, we rely very heavily on the employment and the sectors of hospitality and tourism, but trains do a lot more than bring tourists. And it is an essential part of our network of public transportation that I think needs to be in place. I think that the housing is important from an environmental perspective. As I said, I'm currently building my house with my husband, timber by timber, from land from the property. And I'm aware that people in our region and maybe broader are very concerned about the availability of housing, the affordability of housing, but also there's this sense of panic around the rise in cost of materials. And I do think we need to help unpack people's understanding of how you build a house, and that the house could be a refurbished house, renovated, used with materials that are right here, used with materials from the restore. They don't necessarily have to be brand new from Home Depot, right? And I think that's part of building a greenhouse, right? And we know that as rural people, there's a lot of knowledge, tacit knowledge in our communities about how to live with our resources and use what we have available to us, both skills and materials. And to me, that's a much greener solution. My husband was sharing with me something recently about Germany and how they managed to tip the community perception so that a larger proportion of the German population is now solar powered. Huge gains, right? So why aren't we going there? I think solar power is critical to reducing the climate gases and emissions. Right?
Yeah, and not to mention that keeping the dollars in the local economy improves the economy for everyone at the same time. So before we open things up to the audience, I'm going to bring Sean back because I want us to do another poll. And I'm not technologically sophisticated enough to make that work, Sean. So I'm going to leave that up to you.
No worries. Well, thanks so much. And thanks to our panelists. Great conversation so far. Lots to reflect on. And I'm really struck by how much in common I'm hearing from my neck of the woods in the Guelph area. It's also astounding to me how many municipalities are in that riding. In the riding of Guelph, there's one municipality. So it's a very interesting difference. Anyways, our next poll coming up is the question is going to be, what do you feel is the best way to make our communities more green? Once again, you can choose three options, and if we have people visiting from outside of Parry Sound Muskoka, you're of course welcome to answer for yourself as well. And then we're going to give you guys a few moments to go through this poll, and we're going to reflect on those results. And then my favorite part of the town hall is when Mike gets to ask the audience a question, and we'll use the raise hand feature for that. So you can find that in your on the video call. Right by reactions, there's a raise hand button there that'll let me know that you'd like to speak. And if you're going to do that, we'd really appreciate that you when it comes time to speak that you turn on your camera and of course unmute. I know we have a few people who are joining us by telephone during that time. You could also press *9 to raise your hand. We'd be happy to include you as well. All right, I think we had about a minute and it looks like a couple more votes coming in, some late breaking votes. Looking at Gord Miller there, I think he's voting several times. He looks very, very studious over there. Vote early, vote often, eh, Gord? We'll give that just
I learned it from the NDP.
We'll just give that another couple moments. Then we'll share the results and hear from our guests tonight on what they think. All right, Jess, that's looking pretty good. Let's give that a sense. So little less lopsided than last time where we saw one very clear winner. Again, I'm going to read some of these out because we have some people on the phone who can't see these results. A tie for the top two: local food production and preserve and restore natural spaces, forests, wetlands, and other habitats, both at 54%. Coming in next, incentives for green retrofits and electric vehicles at 46%. Green building code, quite close to that one on 44%. And a few others. I'll mention in particular growing the care economy at 15%. So with that, I'll hand things back to our panel for a quick reaction, and then Mike gets to ask the audience a question.
Well, I'm going to be really brief and just say that it was interesting to see almost all those issues had pretty solid votes, and many of them are near and dear to my heart, whether it's local food production, transit, housing, protecting the places we love, all issues that, I think will have high priorities in the Green Party's platform. Hannah, do you have any thoughts? Matt?
Yeah, I'll jump in quickly. I really like seeing, again, the variety and the openness to the different suggestions. The local food, it hits home so well here, and it really is an amazing thing that we have going in our riding. Not only does this achieve food security, but again, it lowers our the mileage for our food, and it creates good local jobs. Just north of us and in South River, Trout Creek area in Almaguin, we have Wayne and Patty who run Spring Hill Farms, and they're growing lettuces and vegetables year round. Down here into Huntsville, we have people growing, even in our community, we get our lettuces and sprouts year round, again, from local urban, quasi-urban, we're a village, but from our farmers. And it's really impressive what's happening there. And of course, our value-added food items as well. And then when it comes to our farmers producing a whole variety of our staples, it is something that's there, but it can be expanded upon and celebrated much more in our riding. But it's very encouraging to see that that's part of our psyche right now.
I would say that it's not surprising to me to see this list. I think it's amazing that all the top three were tied, right? Local food production, the preserving the habitat, and the public transportation between the towns into rural routes. I think the food production, it's an interesting one because, the Cardin Plain is just south of us, right? So we often don't think about this particular riding being a green belt, but we do. My neighbor is growing asparagus right now and selling chickens, right? If you want to order your chickens and asparagus, Parkway Crossroads, get them today. Yeah, and the preserving the spaces, that makes total sense, right? That's why, again, that's why people want to come here, whether they're just coming here for the season or whether they're moving here, right? We know that the quality of our water and our air impacts the lives of our children, right? How many of us had children who were outside all summer, right? And are still now outside because we know that we haven't talked about this tonight, but mental health, right? It's very, very much tied to our environment, and that it needs to be green, right? It needs to be. I'm not sure what else I can say. The Green Building Code, glad to see it on there, because I think that's something that Muskoka really hasn't dealt with a whole lot at the municipal level. I feel like we're a little bit behind on that one. I do remember when I first moved here, straw bale was not considered an option by most of our municipalities. So it's good to see that it's higher on the agenda, but I think with support from the provincial government, that could change a little bit faster for everybody.
Yeah, thanks for making the connection between mental health and access to nature. I think the pandemic has just highlighted how vital that is. I'm going to ask the audience, I'm going to ask a question and just ask a few audience members to respond to the question, to give some other folks an opportunity to talk. So we've talked a lot about housing in various parts of tonight's conversation. So I think I'll focus in on that. In the world that you want to see, what does equitable access to affordable housing look like in a sustainable green community? And so if there's anyone who wants to raise their hand and take a stab at quickly answering that, go for it.
Thanks so much. And I just wanted to mention that I think, Hannah, you're doing a good job of paying for that new house with your asparagus and chicken sales commissions, eh? All right, so Mike's asked the question, so let's see. I just want to remind people so that you know that under reactions, that's how you raise your hand, and for the people on the phone, *9 to raise your hand as well. And then the last thing I'll mention just before we get started here is that please try to keep your response relatively short. Not that we don't want to hear all about your what you have to contribute, but also we want to try to have as much room for many speakers. So I'm going to start by inviting Fiona, if she'd like to turn on her camera, if that's something you'd like to do. But you can unmute and you can answer Mike's question. Fiona.
Hi. Hi. For me, it looks like having plenty of different kinds of choices for different economic circumstances and different kinds of people. Ontario people in general seem to be wedded to the idea that you get to a certain age and you have to have your own house. I honestly don't think that the economy is evolving that way, so that the youth of today, people coming out of university, are probably not going to be able to afford that. And I think we need to think very much about, consider our young people and allow them to stay in the communities where they grew up or where they were educated by immediately building a lot more affordable rental accommodation, for example, and also finding different kinds of housing, many more co-op situations, for example, different ways that retired people can live together rather than having to go to expensive retirement homes and then bang, they die in long-term care. We're terribly unimaginative when it comes to the different kinds of housing solutions. And I think a diversity would make for much more interesting municipalities and communities. Thank you.
I know I'm not supposed to talk, but we got to sign Fiona up for the platform team.
All right, so Mike's used up all his time. So I'm just joking. So actually I'm gonna ask Matt, and then Mike, and then Hannah, if you have anything that you wanted to share with Fiona on her answer to Mike.
Thank you for sharing, Fiona. And these are the issues I've been hearing as a candidate since 2007 on. And so often our municipalities want to do some of these creative and innovative and progressive ways of meeting housing needs, but they're tied by the provincial policy. And this is where I think it's so vital that at the provincial level, they lay the conditions and the framework for the municipalities to get on with these great ideas. And we'll call them the Fiona policy from here on forward, whenever it works, right? Like, no, you've nailed it. And that's so critical. And this is what our riding needs. This is what our communities are asking for.
Thanks, Mike. What do you think?
Yeah, Fiona, you nailed it. You totally did nail it. I think I've heard from some of our founders for many years that we have to work hard to educate and advocate against the resistance, the NIMBY attitudes that exist in our community, whether it's about the green apartment building or retrofitting the church, co-housing. I've had some good conversations locally about seniors wanting to, break the old model and have a house where, it's an equal share opportunity. As far as I know, we only have one cooperative apartment in Muskoka. I'm not sure about the broader municipality, the broader region, but there could be more of that. There could be a lot more of that. It's not something we have to invent from scratch, right? There's lots of good models out there.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Anything to add to that, Mike, before we move on?
I was going to say that you've all reinforced my support for a bill to remove the barriers to co-housing that's in the legislature that I spoke and voted in favor of. We need to get it out of committee and passed.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just a reminder that if you would like to share your answer, you could of course type that in the chat, and I can help bring that to the conversation. Under reactions, you can raise your hand, and then I just want to once more really invite, and not no pressure, but invite our participants on the phone that if you want to press *9, then we can see your hand up go up as well, is what I was trying to say there. Well, I think we can move on. I'm not seeing a lot there, but so thank you again, Fiona. Really a fantastic response. I also just want to say how amazing it is to see how many people are here. Such a great response and so much engagement from this area. So I want to say thank you very much for that. So now we're going to move into the Q&A portion of tonight's town hall. So this is the time where all of you get to who have a question can use the chat function to post your questions. We have a team of people taking a look. We also, to taking a look, will help select a variety of the questions. And we have been looking at the different questions that have already been posted so far. We've also received many questions and comments on social media across the Green Party of Ontario's different social platforms. We wish we could to talk with them all, but we do have a couple to start off with first. So very first, I'd really like to make sure that we have some time for residents from Parry Sound Muskoka to provide a first-hand account of living in the riding and what questions you have for our panel. And as you think about that, we'll get started with a question that was submitted ahead of time online from Kim Delagram. And Kim's question is, how can we tackle the lack of affordable housing in Muskoka and in other high-priced real estate areas like Greater Toronto? How can the Green Party establish credibility among people who view it as not concerned or capable of solving economic issues? How can this message that we have, and how can the message be that we have an all-encompassing platform to be put out to voters in Parry Sound Muskoka? So I'm going to start off with Matt and then Mike there, and then I'm going to round out with Hannah, in part because I want to make sure Hannah has a chance to talk about affordable housing and doesn't have to answer Green Party campaigning questions. So Matt, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Kim, for the question. And again, it remains to be a very pressing issue. So first and foremost, and this is just hot off the press, we're going to be ensuring that Fiona's law or Fiona's bill gets passed ASAP, because she just has it all encompassing. But really, it examines how we get the ball rolling, whether it be tiny home communities, tiny homes on wheels, laneway homes, shared accommodation, cooperative accommodations, multiplex dwellings. Getting that there, getting that moving forward is so vital. And it's our current MP, Scott Aitchison, when he was the mayor of Huntsville, he addressed this issue with me, and he said, Matt, here's what we need you and Mike to do down at Queen's Park. He's like, we need incentives for developers to get the affordable housing going. And in that case, though, the municipalities can't just find the money. They need that subsidized by the province. So there's again, those partnerships between the municipality and province are so vital, so that we can lessen the red tape improve the conditions and the incentives. And we must ensure, though, too, that affordable housing is always affordable to live in. And one final thought before I pass it on, because that was a loaded question, a lot there. I think we need to revisit the definition of affordable housing when it comes to rent. And currently there's this accepted definition of 30% of your income is what is considered an affordable yearly rent. And that's just not possible anymore. So I think we need to re-examine that definition. If you're making $50,000 per year, that's saying that the maximum your rent could be is 30%, which would be $15,000. Well, that's not possible. And I know that's getting into numbers, but we have to revisit that definition, because this whole issue has been turned upside down since the pandemic has just skyrocketed our housing prices and rental prices.
Thanks, Matt. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, so one, I agree with Fiona about the diversity of housing, and using our existing building stock more efficiently will not only increase the supply of affordable housing, but also minimize impact on the environment and create revenue opportunities for existing homeowners who can bring in things like basement suites or laneway housing, etc. The other thing I'll have to say, though, is part of the challenge over the last 2 decades is the upper levels of government have gotten out of the housing game, so to speak. And so I think your MP is right. The province is going to have to step in and look at ways that it can support co-op housing, social housing, supportive housing with wraparound mental health and addiction supports for the most vulnerable in our community. Those are all going to be vital ways of creating the supply of like deeply affordable housing. And then the final one I'll say is that we need a continuum of policies that assist seniors who want to downsize, young families who want to upsize, young people just getting into renting their first apartment or buying their first home. Is there's got to be a range of affordable options for people, and government policy at both the provincial and federal level have a vital role in creating the incentives and supports to make that happen. And at some point, we're going to be launching a comprehensive housing strategy for Ontario that I can't address in the 30 seconds I have. So I'll just leave it at the highlights.
Thanks, Mike. So Hannah, what do you think about options for tackling lack of affordable housing in Muskoka and other high-priced real estate areas? And please feel free to not comment on Green Party campaigning at all.
Okay, that's fine. Well, and Kim had like 2 or 3 questions in her one question, so that's pretty sneaky of her. I would say at a federal level, the national housing strategy that came out, right? The government agreed to have a gendered lens on all those policies. And I think that's important because women will be disproportionately affected, especially on the housing end where you're talking about shelters, you're talking about supportive housing with the wraparound supports. So I would be remiss if I didn't name that in Ontario, the YWCAs, there's 12 of us, have a coalition and we advocate. And more recently on our website under advocacy, you can see the paper that the Ontario YWCA Coalition submitted pre-budget this spring. And it included, I think a piece of the housing is looking at the employment and skilled trades. And one of the calls that we had was to put a gendered lens on Employment Ontario so that some of the funding that is dedicated for pre-apprenticeship training is earmarked for making sure that women are accessing those employment and apprenticeship programs. In Muskoka, the trades and represents one of the larger employment sectors for us. It is 3% women. That's appalling. We're leaving behind way too many potential skilled workers that could help with those builds as they're happening and rolling out. So I think that's a big piece. And not to touch on the Green Party's inner politics, but I would name that we have a similar challenge. The YWCA, we're often seen as for women and girls and addressing women's issues, right? In a similar way that the Green Party may be struggling with being basically pigeonholed into, well, you only talk about the environment. And I think your previous panel also addressed this. We have to recognize the intersectionality of all the people that we're serving and all these issues, right? Housing is not its own issue. It is interconnected with employment, childcare, food security, our environment where we live, how we want to be in our lives, how we want to retire, and yeah, well-being as a whole. So
Yeah.
my message to you would be just communicate, communicate, communicate. And that's how you build it out in community with lots of conversations like this.
Thanks, Hannah. I really appreciate that. And I also really hope people can hear the opportunity and the optimism and that intersectionality or this dealing with the system of the world that we get to create for ourselves and everyone else. I say that because in doing this work, sometimes when you hear that, it feels like it's so much and it's just pressing down on you. But what I hope you hear there is that there's opportunity all around us to make a difference and to advocate for something better. All right, next up, we've got a question from Sophia Andrew Joyner. And their question is, what is the Green Party doing or planning to do to connect with youth in Parry Sound Muskoka to address climate change and sustainability? After all, we are the future. So of course, Hannah, please feel free to maybe talk about how the YWCA does this. And did you want to start, or would you like me to
Sure.
put Matt on the hot seat? Okay, Hannah,
Yeah,
take it
no,
away.
What the Green Party should do, I'm not 100% sure because that's not my job. But I can tell you what the YWCA does. We reach about 1,500 people a year, and half of them are youth. And we've been doing it through the pandemic with virtual programs, working with our school partners, both school boards. Sometimes we're working with the teachers who are doing learn at home. So it's all virtual. What's interesting about that is we get to reach kids who might be in Halliburton, in Burnt River, in Fenelon Falls, outside of our riding. And like tonight, right? You've got people that are coming from a much larger region. What we are seeing is people still, there's a wide diversity in how people need to socially connect, and youth particularly. There will be some youth that really have been thriving in context in a virtual learning environment, and others that are desperately ready to go back to in-person classroom learning. And I can see us moving towards a future where, we know we've reached 25% more people this past year than the Y has ever reached, with the addition of being able to do things virtually and by distance. And I think it's important that we continue caring for that diversity, but also find ways that in the future we are engaging youth and kids in the solution building. They're an amazing source of new ideas, new learning. They'll be the first to help us move forward on some of the changes that we need for our future. So
I'm going to invite Matt next to draw a line between Hannah's thoughts on engaging youth in the local area to what the Green Party of Ontario in the local area can do. And then we'll wrap up with Mike talking about the very simple task of engaging youth across the province of Ontario.
No, and thank you, Sophia, for the question. And it's something that's been really near and dear to my heart since getting involved at the beginning. And whether it's through reaching out through schools, at elementary, secondary, and post-secondary, and giving the voice back to the students and saying, how can we collectively work together? And how can we do this? Well, we have the opportunity to create a local Parry Sound Muskoka Youth Caucus or a youth wing. And rather than I telling you, it's you coming with your great ideas. And it wasn't too long ago that the high school teacher at Huntsville had approached me with 10 really keen students. And this is going back on almost 2010, I believe. And they came together and they presented the solutions. Here's what we need from when it comes to tuition. Here's what we need for future jobs, good paying jobs. And they were the ones that came up with the ambitious targets and the action plan. And it was that group that came to our convention that we held in Huntsville back in many years ago and actually addressed us and told us how it was done. And Mike, I believe you were there at that time. Yes, you were. Yes. And it was really empowering. So for the record, Sophia, let's get together through Zoom or in person when that time affords, and ensure that we have a youth caucus well in advance going into next year's election.
Thanks so much, Matt. So Mike, how are you going to engage all the youth across Ontario?
You know what? I'm going to be very quick, so I want some more questions. I say go to where the youth are, whether that's online or in person. I think too often times we say, oh, hey, let's create something and bring youth to us. I think it's important to go where youth are and engage.
Thanks, Mike. You know, in my other life, I run the virtual and augmented reality lab at Conestoga College. We have a large team of student developers there, and their brilliance, their creativity, their hope, their optimism, their drive, their incredible hard work it's just wonderful. And I really think going to where the youth are is so important, and then making sure that you take that opportunity seriously and make sure that they're really included and can exert some real influence in what's happening. Thanks so much. Okay, next question comes from Kevin Trimble. He asks, what issues can be addressed that create common ground between full-time residents and seasonal residents? And I think I'm going to start off with Matt on this one so that I can give Mike and Hannah more time to think about that really challenging question.
There we go. No, Kevin, that is a pressing issue as always. And the gap between the seasonal residents to permanent residents is blurring as more spend more time up here compared to where their original permanent dwelling was. But what are those issues that link us together? They're the common issues, of course, that were put forward here tonight. Preserving our public spaces. Those are a benefit for all of us naturally. And rather than dwelling on the obvious, I'd like to bring up an economic point here as well. And that is where our seasonal residents see that our permanent base relies on year-round income, and how they do that and how they value their dollar and where that's spent. How do we bring that together and recognize that? That takes tough work, but these are the issues that do need to come forward in terms of how we move forward so that there isn't, again, this income disparity between many of our seasonal residents and our permanent, but how we can benefit each other, and for them to see how that the value and the power of their dollar spent in our local area is so impactful. Unfortunately, we have many situations where that doesn't necessarily always happen. But that would be one that I'd like to highlight as a side issue, but obviously preserving public spaces is the common issue that we can all link together towards.
Thanks, Matt. Mike, do you have anything that you want to reflect on? Perhaps what role the provincial government might play, or provincial policy to support that bridging?
Yeah, so I think one is affordable access to public spaces, as Matt mentioned. I'll never forget when I first went to Muskoka and was so excited to go and swim in a lake. And then I found it so challenging to find any place where just an average person who didn't know his way around could find public access. So I think that is a really important point. But I think for me, part of it is ensuring that, you know, people who are in precarious employment and in the service sector can earn a living wage, that people have an affordable place that they can call home. Because I think, and I'm certainly not as deep of an expert as Hannah or Matt, but I think one of the challenges we find, particularly in communities that have a lot of tourism as the economic base, is that you have a lot of people from outside the community, or who are maybe part-time residents who have a lot of money, and a lot of permanent residents who don't have as much money. And how do you bridge those economic inequalities, social inequalities, by making sure that we build great communities that people can live in year-round, earn a living wage in year-round, and have affordable housing, access to food, access to the basic necessities of life in a way that creates a more equitable community.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to hand things over to Hannah, but I'm just going to remind everyone of Kevin's question, which is what issues can be addressed that create common ground between full-time residents and seasonal residents?
John, can you read that one more time?
Oh, no worries. What issues can be addressed that create common ground between full-time residents and seasonal residents?
Okay, so I liked both Mike and Matt's answers. I think, Matt, you're right on track. We mutually, both populations are, I think, very concerned about preserving our natural environment. Where we sometimes compress or collide is, for example, I drive down my road to Cooper's Falls Trail, which is 9 kilometers of Trans-Canada Trail, and normally there's nobody there. Now on the weekends, the parking lot's full and there's 8 cars on the highway. So as a local, I'm not going there on the weekend, right? And there you see that us and them, right? But I think Mike's right. If we can address the inequality, the greater inequality, and remove some of the polarizing that's happening, especially on social media. This past year, worse and worse, right? We know that in so many ways. If we can reduce the polarizing and improve the equity between these populations, and I'm going to take a phrase that I had recently. I took a course on conflict and mediation through University of Waterloo, and the presenter, the facilitator, used the term unconditional positive regard. And that really stuck with me. And now when I'm moving around in my daily life and my daily work, that phrase, unconditional positive regard, you can let it sink in, because it is that piece that reminds us we are all human beings, and we're not separate from nature, right? And we are all living with this environment in this community, and we all want to be here. So, that would be the path.
Thanks, Hannah. That put a really beautiful bow on the conversation. So it's 8:41. We're running a little bit late, but the conversation has just been fantastic. I want to say thank you to all of our participants today for your fantastic engagement, your great questions, and choosing to spend your evening with us. This is really meaningful for the Green Party of Ontario. We really want to have the opportunity, and are grateful for the opportunity to hear, in this case, the community members of Parry Sound Muskoka, but across all Ontario as we develop our policy platform for the upcoming provincial election next year. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Mike to sign off and thank our panel guests.
Well, first of all, thank you, Sean, for doing a great job moderating, and thanks to the GPO team for all your technical expertise to make these kinds of events work so successfully. And Hannah, thank you for bringing the perspective, especially the work that you do with the YWCA. I think it's just invaluable, and just in terms of building caring, inclusive, equitable communities. The lens that you brought to this conversation is valuable and will help us in addressing the kind of platform that I know we're going to be proud of, and that will engage with the community. And Matt, thank you for all your great work in being such a community champion in Parry Sound Muskoka. And I'm looking forward to hopefully once the better days, the after times arrive, that I can spend some time in person with you, talking with people, meeting with people one-on-one, knocking on doors, etc. Because this kind of conversation is fantastic, but I really miss that interpersonal interaction that we receive when we're all in the same space. And just thank you to everyone who participated tonight. Your input is valuable. And our goal is to build a platform that's both guided by evidence-based, scientific-based solutions that are guided by experts in their field, but that also connect and relate to the lived experience of people and communities across this province. And the only way that we're going to know how to advocate for policies, advocate for a vision, advocate for a greener and more caring Ontario is if we directly connect and hear from people. Answer your questions, hear your ideas, receive your input, have a sense of what your hope, fears, and dreams are, and really get to know the kind of world that you want to live in and how we can build that Ontario as we emerge from the pandemic. So thank you all for being here tonight. And let's definitely leave with unconditional positive regard as we think about the kind of Ontario we all want to live in. Thank you. Be well, be safe, everyone. Good night.
Thanks so much, Mike. And I just want to wrap up by a huge thank you to the very many people on the Green Party team working behind the scenes for to make such a great event tonight and the other nights. We have more town halls coming up. Please check that out on the GPO website. Also, for people who didn't get a chance to address your questions, we want to let you know that we have a link in chat there for a survey, gpo.ca/reimagining-Ontario/survey. That's too much to remember, so you just click the link in chat. We really want to hear from you so that we can do our best job to listen carefully, bring together what we hear from across Ontario, and earn your support in the next election. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.